Your brain is making a mistake right now. Not occasionally. Not under unusual circumstances. Not only when you're tired or stressed or distracted, every single day. Dozens of times. Quietly. Automatically. Without asking your permission or announcing that it's happening. And the strangest part is that this mistake is not a flaw. It was never a flaw. It was, for most of human history, one of the most useful things your brain could do. It kept your ancestors alive. It allowed them to make fast decisions in dangerous situations. It let them navigate a complex world without stopping to analyze everything from scratch every single time. And then the world changed. And the thing that once kept them alive started doing something else entirely. But before we get there, we need to understand what the mistake actually is, because it is almost certainly not what you're expecting. It has nothing to do with memory, nothing to do with logic or reasoning or the way you solve problems. It has to do with something far more fundamental, the way your brain decides what is truth. Here is where it starts. Your brain receives an enormous amount of information every second. Sensory data from your eyes, ears, skin, and body. Social signals from the faces and voices of the people around you. Memories surfacing from decades of accumulated experience. Predictions about what is about to happen. Emotional signals from systems far older than conscious thought. All of it, simultaneously, constantly, in a volume no conscious mind could ever fully process. So your brain does something it had to learn to do. It filters. It decides, below conscious awareness, what is worth bringing to your attention and what can be handled automatically. And the primary tool it uses for that filtering is something called a cognitive shortcut, a heuristic, a rule of thumb so deeply embedded in the brain's architecture that you follow it without ever deciding to. These shortcuts are not errors. In the environments they were built for, they were extraordinary tools. They allowed your ancestors to recognize danger before consciously identifying it, to make decisions with incomplete information and still be right most of the time, to navigate social situations, predict other people's behavior, and manage the complexity of group life without running an exhaustive analysis of every interaction. The shortcuts were efficient. They were fast. And in a world where speed often mattered more than perfect accuracy, they were correct often enough to be worth their occasional failures. But here is where the mistake lives. And this is the part worth sitting with. Your brain applies these ancient shortcuts to a world they were never designed for, without adjusting them, without flagging that the conditions have changed, without any internal signal that the tool being used may not fit the task at hand. It just runs the shortcut and produces a conclusion that feels, from the inside, exactly like a carefully considered thought. The biggest mistake your brain makes every day is not that it gets things wrong. It is that it gets things wrong with complete confidence. Let's look at the specific shortcut that causes the most damage. It is called the availability heuristic, and it is running inside you right now. Here is how it works. When your brain needs to assess how likely something is, how common, how dangerous, how significant, it doesn't run a statistical analysis. It asks a much simpler question. How easily can I think of an example? If examples come to mind quickly, the brain concludes the thing must be common or likely. If examples are hard to find, it concludes the thing is rare or unlikely. This was a reasonable shortcut in the ancient world. In a small community where your information came from direct experience and the shared knowledge of the people around you, the things that came to mind most easily were usually the things that happened most often. The shortcut worked. But here is what happens when you run the same shortcut in a world with 24-hour news cycles, social media feeds, and an information environment specifically designed to surface the most extreme, vivid, and emotionally activating examples of everything. The things that come to mind most easily are no longer the things that happen most often. They are the things that were reported most dramatically, covered most extensively, repeated most frequently, designed to produce the strongest emotional response. And your brain, running an ancient shortcut, treats ease of recall as evidence of likelihood. This is why most people dramatically overestimate the risk of dying in a plane crash and dramatically underestimate the risk of dying in a car. Not because they haven't been told the statistics, but because vivid plane crash imagery is far more available in memory than the quiet accumulation of car accident data. The shortcut mistakes memorability for frequency, vividness for truth, and it does this not just with risk assessment. With almost everything, the quality of your work relative to others, the kindness or hostility of the world around you, the likelihood that things will go wrong, the prevalence of the things that frighten you most, all of it filtered through a brain that is asking not what is actually true, but What comes to mind most easily? Now hold that thought, because there is a second mistake running alongside the first. And this one is even harder to see because it doesn't feel like a mistake at all. It feels like being right. Your brain has a system for managing the enormous effort of processing new information. Once it has formed a belief about something, a person, a situation, an idea, a version of yourself, it does something both efficient and dangerous. It starts filtering incoming information through that belief, noticing the evidence that confirms it, discounting the evidence that challenges it, interpreting ambiguous information in whatever direction fits the existing model. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. And it runs in every human brain alive, not in the clearly deluded, not in the obviously closed-minded, in everyone, in you, in the most careful, self-aware, intellectually honest people you know. Because it is not a product of stubbornness or ignorance. It is a product of efficiency. Your brain cannot re-examine every belief from scratch every time new information arrives. The processing cost would be unsustainable, so it built a shortcut. Assume the existing model is probably right. Let through the information that confirms it. Apply skepticism selectively to the information that doesn't. In a world where beliefs were formed through direct experience and tested against physical reality, this shortcut was reasonably self-correcting. A wrong belief about where water could be found got corrected by reality, quickly and unmistakably. But in a world where beliefs can be formed secondhand, through media, through culture, through the information environment surrounding you from childhood, and where reality provides ambiguous enough feedback that almost any belief can find confirming evidence, the shortcut runs unchecked, and a belief formed years ago, in different circumstances, with incomplete information, gets defended today with the full weight of a brain that has spent the intervening years collecting evidence for it, not because the belief is true, but because the system was never designed to distinguish between a belief earned through experience and a belief inherited without examination. Here is where both mistakes come together. The availability heuristic shapes what information enters your mind most easily. Confirmation bias shapes what your mind does with it once it arrives. Together, they form a loop. You see more of what you already believe. What you already believe becomes easier to recall. What is easier to recall feels more true. What feels more true becomes a stronger belief. And the loop tightens, not through malice, not through laziness, but through the operation of systems that were built for a world far simpler than this one. A world where the information you received was real, where it came from direct experience, where what you saw with your own eyes was what was actually happening. That world is gone, but the shortcuts that were built for it are still running. On an information environment, they were never designed to navigate. At a scale they were never built to handle. Now here's the part that most conversations about cognitive bias leave out, and it is the part that actually matters. Knowing about these mistakes does not make you immune to them. This is perhaps the most humbling finding in all of cognitive psychology. People who are educated about the availability heuristic still show the availability heuristic. People who understand confirmation bias still exhibit confirmation bias. The shortcuts don't operate in the conscious mind. They operate beneath it, in systems faster and more authoritative than conscious thought, which means that awareness, while genuinely valuable, is not the solution. It is the beginning of one, because what awareness gives you is not immunity. It gives you a moment, a brief gap between the automatic conclusion and the action you take based on it. A sliver of space where you can ask a question the ancient system never stops to ask. Is what I am most easily imagining actually what is most likely? Or is it just what I have seen most often? Is the belief I am defending actually true? Or is it just the one I have spent the most time confirming? Is the conclusion that arrives so confidently and so completely formed actually the result of careful evaluation? Or is it a shortcut running ancient software on a world it was never designed for? Your brain is not broken. It is precisely, exhaustively, extraordinarily well designed for a world that no longer exists. And the biggest mistake it makes every day is not incompetence, it is confidence. The confidence of a system that was right often enough, for long enough, in the world it was built for, that it never developed a mechanism for doubt. That never needed to, until now. You are the first version of your species living in a world complex enough to require that mechanism, and you are building it in real time with a brain that was never given the instruction manual for what it was about to face. The mistake is not yours, but the awareness of it is, and that awareness small and imperfect and incomplete as it is the only thing that creates the distance between the shortcut and the choice, between what the ancient brain concludes automatically and what you, with everything you know, decide to do next.